Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly foundational piece of thinking. It's called The Theory That Would Not Die. And honestly, The Theory That Would Not Die by Sharon Birch McGrain is not what you think it is. If you hear The Theory That Would Not Die and assume we're doing a dry, chalkboard history of math, don't worry, we're absolutely not. What Sharon Birch McGrain has actually given us in this book is a precision lens for surviving everyday uncertainty. It is the practice of seeing clearly. So the theory that would not die isn't just about a 250-year-old math theorem surviving centuries of scorn. It's about how your own mind can survive contact with reality without breaking when the fog of life inevitably rolls in.
Let's be honest. Most highly intelligent people treat uncertainty like it's just a temporary delay, right? We tell ourselves we're just waiting for a cleaner signal, waiting for a better mood, a perfect data set, maybe just waiting for some final glowing sign from the universe before we finally take the plunge. It feels responsible. It feels incredibly secure. But I want to challenge that assumption right now. What if waiting for perfect certainty is the exact reason you stay lost?
Let that sting for just a second. Your proud habit of collecting more facts might actually be the very mechanism hiding your lack of a starting belief. You might call it research. You probably genuinely think you're being incredibly thorough, reading one more article, buying one more book, gathering just one more data point before making a choice. But here is the quiet, devastating truth. Without a starting point, new information doesn't actually guide you. It just stirs you around in circles. It creates this beautiful illusion of progress with absolutely zero momentum. Which brings us to a concept that completely shatters a very common illusion. The mind without a prior is not neutral. We absolutely love to think of ourselves as these beautifully objective judges, sitting back in our mental robes, weighing evidence perfectly as it arrives. But aimless drifting has a hidden structure. True neutrality is often just an unnamed starting belief, wearing a really clean short. If you don't actually name your starting frame, your baseline assumption about a situation, it still rules your decisions in secret. It heavily biases how you interpret every single new piece of evidence you stumble across. So, moving into Section 1, the architecture of doubt, focusing on motion without a model. Let's diagnose the exact pain of the directionless mind. Picture your desk, late at night. You've got 20 browser tabs open, 5 pages of frantic highlighted notes. You have been at it for hours. And you know what? It looks incredibly busy. It looks like serious, noble work. But no actual decision has been made. This is the sheer exhaustion of motion without architecture. You are burning an incredible amount of calories, but the work just doesn't compound into a clear path forward. You're basically looking at two completely different paths here. One is the old paradigm, wait until certainty arrives. The other is the new paradigm, build a map and revise it. That first option feels incredibly safe. Why? Because you never actually have to commit. You can always just say, oh, I'm still gathering data. But that second option is actually where true safety lies. Being a scholar of endless options just makes you a total stranger to action. We have to shift away from that false safety of waiting on the shore. We need to step into the deep intimacy of building a living, breathing model of reality today. To do that, we have to understand what a prior actually means in Bayesian probability. I know, a lot of people instantly tense up when they hear this term. They hear the word bias, they picture a dirty thumb pressing down on the scale of justice. But let's strip away that stigma right now. A prior is simply the belief you bring before new evidence arrives. Think of it like guessing your commute will take 30 minutes based on past experience. That's your prior. It is the floor under your first step. You don't have to worship the floor, and frankly, it might be slightly off, but you have to stand on it so movement can actually begin. It is your vital first piece of architecture. A prior is, at its core, simply the courage to start somewhere. Think about what happens biologically when you actively avoid naming a prior. Because you refuse to put a stake in the ground, your brain is forced to constantly, endlessly weigh all possible paths at once. And your body literally reads that infinite processing as danger. That's exactly where that tightness in your jaw comes from at the end of a long workday. It's why your chest tightens, it's why your day feels so incredibly noisy. It is the sheer physical fatigue of unstructured doubt. Your mind is trying to hold up the entire sky. So the crucial takeaway here is this. Your doubt needs architecture. Now, don't get me wrong, doubt is a genuinely good thing. It protects you from blind pride, from catastrophic financial mistakes, from bad relationships. We absolutely must honor it. But we cannot allow it to rule the room. Doubt will completely paralyze your progress if it just pools in your chest with nowhere to go. It needs a rigid frame to sit comfortably inside so it can inform you rather than overwhelm you. When you finally name your prior, you are simply drawing the very first draft of your map. And remember, a map is not a cage. It's just a tool. When you draw a map, you are entirely allowed to pull out an eraser and redraw the borders the second you stumble across a new river or an unexpected mountain. You do not have to fiercely defend your first draft as your core identity. You just have to use it to take your very first step out the door. Moving to Section 2, the discipline of updating, moving under partial light. Now we're going to descend from the high-level abstract theory and ground it into a really vivid, disciplined practice. How do you actually revise your map in real time when the pressure is on and the stakes are incredibly high? There is a stark contrast we need to acknowledge. Usually, we view uncertainty as a massive flaw in our planning, don't we? But the true Bayesian philosophy treats uncertainty as the raw material of judgment. Think of a specific moment when you felt completely paralyzed by a lack of data. Now place this book's lens into that memory. I want you to picture Alan Turing's team at Bletchley Park during World War II. Night is heavy on the windows. A worker is sitting under a dim lamp, furiously updating probability sheets to crack the Enigma code. They do not have the clean, perfect truth. They just have intercepted signals arriving like broken weather. But they are actively using the fog. They are making disciplined, mathematical updates under partial light, inching closer to the truth one tiny percentage point at a time. Think of it like an astronomer looking at the night sky. An astronomer revises an orbit from imperfect sightings, not from final certainty. One fleeting sighting of a comet? That's not enough to know where it's going. 2 sightings start to bend the line. A 3rd sighting changes the projected orbit completely. The sky didn't betray the astronomer. The map just grew up. You don't need a grand cinematic flash of total truth to make a brilliant decision. You just need a willingness to make repeated, small corrections to your starting belief based on what you can actually see today. But here's where we have to be incredibly careful with our new map. You can so easily use this updating system to just bend the incoming data toward what you wanted to believe all along. One paradigm uses thought to protect the ego, the other uses thought to expose the ego. Applying Bayes' rule and continually updating your priors is not an escape hatch to cleverly justify your current beliefs. When used correctly, it is meant to be a far stricter, far more rigorous form of intellectual honesty. It forces you to ask, what exact evidence would actually prove me wrong? Because if you only accept evidence that cleverly confirms your own brilliance, you are just locking the gate to real progress. We so often think of certainty as a virtue, right? A sign of strong leadership or high intelligence. But in reality, certainty may just be the ultimate hiding place. It's a cozy blanket. It is the exact place where our egos go to avoid the incredibly uncomfortable, messy work of admitting we were wrong and learning something completely new. Let's shift gears now into Section 3, setting the decision threshold, the scaffolding of action. This is where we move out of philosophy and into deep tactical execution. We need to build a domain-locked scaffolding to completely replace your mind's impossible demand for perfect, airtight proof. This is the new paradigm you absolutely must step into. Stop waiting for a sign and start setting a threshold. A threshold is a profound mercy. It keeps you from thrashing around with every single gust of new data, and it keeps you from freezing in fear at every shadow. By choosing your line of action before the emotional mood actually arrives, you stabilize your entire mind. You are essentially making a binding deal with your future self, negotiated when your current self actually has a clear head. We can make this process incredibly tangible by setting specific milestones. For example, say you're launching a new project. At 60% confidence, you don't jump. You just keep watching the market. At 70%, you begin to test the waters with a small pilot. At 80%, you act decisively and allocate the budget. And at 90%, you fully commit. These numbers aren't some sacred magic. They are scaffolding. Walking through a staged updating process like this visualizes exactly how you keep your mind from drowning in the daily flood of doubt. You know exactly what percentage triggers what action. So before your next major life or business choice, you need to hold a clear 3-part private court with yourself. Step 1, state your current belief, name your prior out loud. Step 2, identify the exact evidence that would force you to change it. Step 3, set the threshold for action. If you do this before you dive headfirst into the data, your ego doesn't get the chance to shout over the incoming evidence. You have already built a calm, rational landing pad for the information to arrive on. This brings us to the ultimate goal of a refined mind.
We all desperately want our confidence to feel like an unbreakable stone. But true, resilient confidence is not a stone. It is a living joint. Think of a modern skyscraper. It is quite literally engineered to sway slightly in heavy winds. It bends. It bears weight. It changes angle when new facts arrive and the load of reality changes. That flexibility is not weakness. That is a robust, dynamic architecture that keeps you moving forward without lying to yourself.
Moving to our final section, the courage to revise, leaving the fog. This is where we synthesize the grand, sweeping history of this theory with your own very real internal survival, the architecture of the self. That is the hidden driving force in Sharon Birch McGrane's brilliant story. The theory would not die because learning would not die. This mathematical rule survived centuries of intense academic scorn because reality demanded it. The military needed it to hunt submarines, medical science needed it to find cancer links, and ultimate human judgment needed it to survive. Reality will always demand continuous revision under the fog. And if you want to grow, your life demands exactly the same thing. So I want to leave you with a piercing question to ask yourself right now. Which belief are you protecting by calling it uncertainty? Take a moment, feel the exact fear that is driving your delay. Remember that the flinch you just felt is nothing more than data. Use it. Now, go update your map. The fog isn't going anywhere, but now you have the probabilistic tools to navigate straight through it. Access your personal growth map and continue the internal transformation at upgowise.com.